Welcome to the Go Higher Show, where we are dedicated to higher levels of leadership, purpose, and the power of transformation. We empower and equip leaders to rise, mindsets to transform, and legacies to evolve. Hosted by Mr. Hakim Erwin, author, leadership and public speaking coach, and the transformational influencer. Here on the Go Higher Show, we are dedicated to helping individuals transform your mindset, build character and emotional intelligence, develop executive presence, lead with integrity and influence, and prepare for greater assignments. Welcome again to the Go Higher Show. Let's go. Welcome to the Go Higher Show. I am your host, Mr. Hakim Erwin, and I am a leadership and public speaking coach, an author, and your transformational influencer. Welcome to episode number 9. Did I do that right? Yeah, number nine of the Go Higher Show. Thank you to everyone who has joined us, who has supported, subscribed to the channel. You liked and subscribed, you commented, whatever the case is. We appreciate you. Thank you for riding us all this way up to episode number 9. Today we are going to be talking about the narrow path. The narrow path. And this is a very transformational teaching. It's one that has changed humanity for generations. Now, of course, some of you may know or have heard about the narrow path. It's from a biblical scripture where it says, Yeshua says, "Enter by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction. And there are many who go in by it, because narrow is the gate and difficult is the way which leads to life, and there are few who find it." Now, this is not a religious podcast. This is not a religious show. However, I am a follower of Yeshua, and I do wholeheartedly believe in his teachings. So this is one that I believe in terms of leadership. When you look at a leader, I believe personally, this is why a few episodes ago we talked about servant leadership, and he was the model for servant leadership. And again, I know, not everyone may be of the particular faith or things like that. And again, this is not about religion. This is not about, your faith or anything like that. What we have here is an individual who was a model leader, one who exemplified servant leadership, which a whole area, just for lack of better words, or a whole area of leadership has been modeled after Yeshua's leadership, right? We talked about it called servant leadership. And this is one of the topics and one of the things that he talked about is this narrow path. Now, let me just tell y'all, today, as you can see, this episode is going to be a lot more laid back. There's a lot less things going on in the background and everything. This one is recorded live, so you're going to get all the mistakes, all the word fumbles, everything, right? We just going to do this bad boy live. So, again, the narrow path. Let's talk about this narrow path, because this lesson wasn't just about spirituality, or this lesson isn't just about spirituality, okay? This teaching, this lesson on leadership, this show, this particular episode on the narrow path, this isn't just about spirituality. As a matter of fact, it's not about spirituality. And this lesson that he taught on the narrow path isn't about or just about spirituality. It's really about discipline. That's what this narrow path lesson that he taught is really about. And that's what this episode is really going to be focusing on: discipline. It's about character. It's about integrity. And ultimately, like every other episode, this has a lot to do with leadership. All right. Building leadership. I mentioned, I believe, maybe are we going back to our first episode? One of the goals of Greater Faith and Favor Life LLC that I had is just to really help change the narrative on leadership, how leadership is looked at, right? We know that one of the number one reasons it's told to us facts-wise, right, through studies that have been done, the number one reason why people leave jobs is because of poor management, bad management. When I was doing my seminars all across this country on leadership and management, one of my main topic was actually dealing with difficult employee behavior and also dealing with difficult people, those two main topics. And one of the things I heard, besides reading the facts for myself, just talking to people, was people leaving their jobs or, basically resigning from previous jobs, and how they got to this present situation that we were in was because of bad leadership. And so one of the things that we really want to do at Greater Faith and Favor, and one of the purposes for the Go Higher Show, is to help change and shift that narrative about bad leadership. I want to do my part in helping to build better leadership. People who think more about people instead of themselves. People who don't have a hidden agenda about it all really being about them and just treating people unfair, all those type of things, unethical, to really helping to build up people's character and their integrity, and just making better leaders, and helping you even become a better leader. And ultimately, while I'm called the transformational influencer, is to help you transform, into a better leader. So this path is a very broad path that we're talking about, right? This path is, or should I say that the broad path, I told y'all this is live, right? The broad path is an easy path. It's the narrow path that's the difficult one. But the broad path is the one that the crowd follows. That's the one that places comfort over conviction, right? But exceptional leaders, true leaders, they often walk that narrow path, that difficult path, the one with the decisions that are really difficult to make. And today, that's what I really want us to talk about. Because in this generation, many people, they want elevation without the discipline. They want influence without accountability. They want power without restraint. But see, that narrow path, that teaches us something completely different. It teaches us that greatness is not built through shortcuts, right? There's not a shortcut to greatness. It's built through self-governance, consistency, wisdom, obedience to principles, those things that many people refuse to follow. And see, the truth is this, that some of the great decisions, or some of the greatest decisions that you will ever make in your life, will not be the popular decisions. All right. If you're a parent, you know that for sure. A lot of the decisions that we have to make in our households for our children, they're not popular decisions, right? They're not going to have us loved. They're not going to have us liked. Anyone who's a leader right now listening to me, a lot of the decisions that you have to make, maybe giving out mandatory, or issuing, let me not say giving out because you're not really giving it out, but issuing mandatory overtime, things like that, right? Those are rough decisions and difficult decisions that are not going to be popular. But in order to get the job done, in order to do what needs to be done, we need to make those unpopular decisions. And that's what true leaders, to a degree, never really get comfortable doing. If you get comfortable in making those difficult decisions or those hard decisions, then maybe you might want to do a little bit more self-awareness, maybe looking inside to see if you're not getting a kick out of, doing those negative things to people, or, making those tough decisions. Again, we have to do them, but enjoying them is a whole nother situation, right? That's probably a whole nother episode. But why is the broad path so attractive? Well, the broad path is so attractive because it requires very little resistance. It's not really that difficult going the way that everybody wants to go. It's not that difficult doing what everybody likes to do, or feeding into what people really enjoy. See, the broad path says, do what everybody else is doing. So, that's the popular way. That's the popular thing. The broad path will say, take the shortcut. The broad path will say, compromise if it benefits you, right? The broad path will say protect your image instead of your integrity. Protect your image instead of your integrity, right? And remember, integrity is doing the right thing even when nobody else is around. So that'll be the thing that people won't see. Oftentimes you won't get praise for, but are you still going to do the right thing? That's what integrity really is. And that broad path says, later for that, I want to do the thing that's going to make me look good to everybody, right? And that's what a good leader does not want to do. A good leader will emphasize integrity more. See, the broad path rewards appearance. The broad path develops, or the narrow path develops substance. Let me say that again. The broad path rewards appearance, how things look on the outside, right? But the narrow path, that develops substance, right? That thing that holds everything together, that foundation. And many people confuse popularity with leadership. But you see, leadership is not proven by how many people applaud you. Yay, yeah, you're so wonderful. You're so great. Leadership is proven by whether people can trust you when the applause stops, when things get quiet, when the rewards start coming in. See, the broad path often produces arrogance, wisdom, or arrogance without wisdom. Excuse me. I told y'all this is a lot. All right. The broad path often produces arrogance without wisdom, influence without discipline, and power without restraint. But you see, the narrow path, that's the one that develops patience, humility, emotional control, discernment, consistency, and moral strength. See, the narrow path is difficult precisely because it demands self-governance. You have to be able to govern yourself, govern your emotions. Because, see, many people want the authority without first mastering themselves. They don't want those restraints. They don't want to put limitations on themselves. They want to just be free and do whatever they think they want to do. But hear this clearly. Please hear this very, very clearly. If you cannot govern yourself, then you cannot effectively govern responsibility. And leadership, having authority, that's all about responsibility. That's why some people rise very quickly, but they collapse suddenly. They rise quickly, but they collapse suddenly. Because, see, promotion can elevate your position while simultaneously exposing your character, who you really are, what your intentions really are. The narrow path prepares you for the weight of leadership before the weight ever arrives. And that preparation matters. You ever notice how, and I've experienced this by the grace of God many times, there's been situations where I was actually doing the job before I got the title. I was doing the work before I got the title. I was doing the work before I got the promotion. And that's by design, not by default. That is really by design, truly by design, rather than default. And if you notice, there are even some employers who will have you operate in a role before you actually get the title, before you actually get the promotion, because they want to see how you're going to perform. And sometimes they'll tell you, but in most cases, and I think this is a better situation, if you don't tell the person, that it's a test. Because see, what a lot of people will do, and y'all know where I'm going with this, a lot of people will front, right, and pretend and do all these things just to get it. And as soon as they get it, then they revert back, or they stop doing those things that help them get the promotion. And sometimes that's just a risk that you have to take as a leader. You have to try your best to prepare a person for something. And if they do choose to revert back or not do the things that got them there, then that's going to be one of those situations to where, like we said, they rise quickly, but they collapse suddenly. because it'll, as we just said, that narrow path, that will expose your character. That will expose, you actually having that feeling of, man, as soon as I get this, I ain't doing all this crap no more. I ain't doing all this. Or why should I put forth my best effort and I might not even get the job? And then sometimes, and this is the part that stings a lot of people, sometimes you've done that in the past and you didn't get the job. So you did the work and then they ended up giving it to somebody else for whatever reasons. And a lot of times things like that are done because somewhere along the line it was exposed that you weren't ready. Now, of course, there are other elements, obviously, right? We know favoritism can come into play. Some people hook people up, stuff like that, right? But we're not going to get into that. We're talking about you and your efforts and your intentions and all those things and your character. So again, promotion can elevate your position while simultaneously exposing your character. And that narrow path prepares you for that weight of leadership before it even arrives. And that, again, that preparation matters. Because, see, once people trust you, your words matter. See, that's why it's so dangerous to put on that front and do what it takes to get the role. And then when you get it, you switch up. Because now people have trusted you. They put their trust in you. And then you flip on them. You just blew all your credibility goes out the window. And you can apologize all you want. You can say, sorry, you want, promise you'll make a change. But when people truly give you their trust, especially as a leader, when they give you their trust and you betray that trust for whatever reason, it is very difficult, sometimes even impossible with some people, to gain that trust back. Because, see, leadership is stewardship, and stewardship requires discipline. One of the hardest realities of leadership is this. Sometimes doing the right thing will make you stand alone. My wife and I was just talking about that yesterday. Sometimes being a leader means you have to make a choice. Because sometimes as a leader, you're given the information, not everybody else. You're given the information, so you know what it takes to get to where you need to be, or you're given the vision sometimes, depending upon the situation. And in certain situations, you can't really divulge the information to everyone, or you have to be careful or mindful how you give the information to everyone. So a lot of times as leaders, you're going to have the vision, you're going to see the thing, and sometimes you can't share that. So you have to be willing to stand alone. You have to be willing to say, you know what? I know what it takes to get us there. So if I need to do this on my own, then that's just what I got to do. Because there will be some situations where people will not move until they start seeing some results. So that means you as the leader, you have to, a lot of times you may have to do what you have to do until that thing starts showing, until that thing begins to reap some results or show some rewards. Then people may join along. And as a leader, you got to be okay with that. Because I know even that's difficult, right? Because then as the leader, you're like, oh, now y'all want to join me. Now y'all want to jump on the bandwagon now that y'all know it's working. Well, look, sometimes as a leader, you got to do that. Because some people won't move until that situation happens, until they see that it works. And again, as a leader, that's why sometimes you got to be able to stand alone. Because sometimes you can allow those people to come join you. Then other times you're going to have to tell those people no. Because I needed you while I was building it, and because you didn't believe or you didn't trust me or whatever the situation was, then you chose not to, and I don't need that with me now. So that's where being a leader, it's always a constant balance. Sometimes you will need the people who come on late, and then other times you'll have to be like we just said, nope, I can't trust you, or I did it without you. I can do it with 3 people instead of 4 or 5 people, because these 3 people stuck it out with me. These 3 people joined in early. These 3 people showed me that they're really truly with me. You just jumping on a bandwagon because things looking good right now. So a leader has to know the difference. One of the hardest realities is this. Again, as we just mentioned, told y'all this is live. A leader has to be willing to stand alone. And that narrow path, it is lonely at times. You may be required to refuse corruption when others participate in it. Got that money, you know, other people getting rich, or they accepting payoffs. That's corruption. And you got to be willing to not participate in that. Refuse that. Refuse that payoff. Refuse that extra incentive. You have to be willing, or this may require you to remain calm even when everyone else is emotional. How many times have that happened? Everyone else is getting all excited or crying or whatever the case is. And you got to stay even. You got to stay calm. Everybody else is getting upset. They getting mad, or sometimes maybe they're getting too happy, and you got to be level-headed, right? It may require you to speak the truth when silence would be easier. How many times is it really easy to just say nothing? You just sit back. I ain't saying nothing. I've done that several times, and I know I knew better. But I've also spoke up sometimes a little bit too much, because I am very expressive. I am not shy in expressing my opinion and telling people what I think, and I've learned to dial that back sometimes, or do it when it's appropriate. It may also require you to show restraint when pride wants to retaliate. Oh my goodness. When you want to defend yourself, right? Or you don't want your words to be misconstrued. Well, guess what, y'all? Sometimes you got to let your words be taken how people take them. You know what your intentions are. You know what you meant. You know what the real situation is. You don't always need to defend yourself. You don't always need to make it clear. Sometimes you make it worse trying to make it better, or trying to make it clear. And then also, it may require you to maintain standards when compromise seems profitable. But this is exactly what separates leaders from followers. See, anybody can move the crowd, but it takes strength to move with conviction. Hopefully I said that right without the F, because I'm from Philadelphia. So, you know, we pronounce things that should have a TH on the end with an F instead. So hopefully I said strength instead of strength, right? But it takes strength to move with conviction. Exceptional leaders understand something important, that character is more valuable than charisma. Character is more valuable than charisma. Because, see, charisma may attract people initially, but character is what keeps trust alive over time, and that's what's essentially important as a leader. Keeping that trust, your people being able to trust you over time. See, people may admire talent, but they follow integrity. People may admire talent, but they will follow integrity. And the leaders who leave lasting impression are usually the ones who choose principle over popularity. And let's be honest, the crowd can be dangerous. Crowds can normalize dysfunction, right? Think about that for a second, how people can, and I know y'all have seen it. I know somewhere, some way, somehow you have seen people normalize dysfunction. Crowds can celebrate foolishness. Come on, y'all. I know that. All you got to do is look at, I shouldn't even say this, but it is what it is. I've already started. Look at a lot of stuff that's happening in a lot of churches, especially in the Western world, especially in America. Let me just say America. In America. Look at the foolishness that goes on in a lot of churches. And it's blatant. It should be blatant, right? It's blatant to a lot of us. It's blatant to most people except for the ones that, you know, have the wool over their eyes for whatever that foolishness is, right? I'm not saying all things that go on in church is foolishness. Definitely not. You have some very good pastors out there, some very good people who mean well and actually try to follow the true teachings of Yeshua. So, you know, you can't put everybody in that category. And crowds can pressure people into abandoning wisdom, right? I think back to another story. Man, I guess this is just a whole Bible reference and definitely episode here, but that just automatically made me think about how people can pressure people in, or crowds can pressure people into abandoning wisdom. If you read the story, I believe it's in Exodus, of Moses and Aaron, his brother Aaron, when Moses went to the mountain for the 40 days and 40 nights, and Aaron was left over the people, and the people basically pressured him to make an idol, right? And he folded. He took all their jewelry, their gold. Think about that, y'all. They had enough gold to melt it down and for him to make a golden calf. All right. And I'm sure it wasn't a little small miniature one. A golden calf. They melted the gold down and made a calf out of it for the people to worship. Oh my goodness. To see how pressure or crowds can pressure people into abandoning wisdom. He knew better, but yet he still did it. History is filled with examples of groups moving in the wrong direction simply because nobody had the courage to stand apart. Nobody wanted to stand alone. Nobody wanted to stand apart. People felt more comfortable in the crowd. But that's why leadership requires discernment. Good leadership requires discernment. A true leader does not ask, what is everybody doing? A true leader asks, what is right? All right, what is the right thing to do? And sometimes the answer to that question will cost you comfort. It'll cost you the approval of people. It will cost you relationships. It may cost you opportunities, promotions, or even temporary popularity. But in the end, integrity ages better than compromise ever will. There was once a guy let me share a story with y'all. So there was once a guy responsible for leading travelers through dangerous mountain terrain. Two paths existed. The first path was wide, it was crowded, it was easy to travel. Many people chose it because it looked safe and familiar. The second path was narrow, it was quiet and difficult. It required patience, focus, and discipline. So one young traveler asked the guide, why do you continue taking the narrow path when almost everyone else chooses the wide path? What's up with that? Why are you doing it? The guide calmly responded. Because the wide path was built for convenience. The narrow path was built to actually reach the destination safely, right? So that's why I take that path. Days later, a violent storm came to those mountains, and it hit the mountains. The broad road began collapsing under pressure because it was built on unstable ground. But that narrow path, that endured the storm because it had been built carefully, established on solid ground. Remember, it was built to get you there safely, to get to the destination, so the foundation had to be solid. And the travelers who trusted the disciplined guide survived the journey. So what's the lesson in that? See, a true leader is not responsible for choosing the easiest path. A true leader is responsible for choosing the right one. Let me give you a second story. Matter of fact, I already put it out there, so let me just give you this second story. There was a young executive who was rising quickly through the company. He was intelligent, he was articulate, driven, and because of his talent, people believed that he had a bright future. But as he entered higher levels of leadership, he noticed something troubling. Many people around him cut corners, right? They took those shortcuts. Some manipulated numbers to protect appearances. Others avoided accountability by blaming their teams. I know a lot of y'all seen that. Some spoke about integrity publicly while practicing deception privately. At first, he felt the pressure to conform. He was thinking to himself, if I don't play the game like everybody else, maybe I'll fall behind. But something within him refused to compromise. So he chose the narrow path. good choice, right? He chose a narrow path. He remained honest in meetings. He gave credit to his team instead of taking it for himself. Look at me. All right. He admitted mistakes instead of hiding those mistakes. He treated employees with dignity instead of intimidation. Now, for a while, it seemed like his integrity was slowing his advancement. Others climbed faster than him. Others became more visible than he was. But years later, not months, not weeks, years later, when the organization entered a crisis, the executives began searching for someone trustworthy enough to stabilize the culture. Guess who they called on? Guess who they selected? Not the most political, not the most manipulative. They chose the man whose character remained constant over time, because eventually true leadership will reveal itself. When pressure increases, people stop looking for performers. They look for trustworthy leaders. Now, let me give you a couple takeaways, some practical takeaways, and the weekly challenge. Number one, protect your integrity. Never trade long-term trust for short-term gain. Never trade long-term trust for short-term gain. Short-term gain. A damaged reputation may take years to rebuild. Protect your name, protect your standards, protect your character. Because once trust is broken, influence truly weakens. So number one, protect your integrity. Number two, practice restraint, please. Practice restraint. Not every insult deserves a response. Not every opportunity deserves your participation. That's one I had to learn. I thought every opportunity I was supposed to jump on. Maturity is often revealed through what you refuse to do. Oh man, I'm living that right now. Some of the strongest leaders are not the loudest people in the room. They are the people with enough discipline to remain composed under pressure. So number two, practice restraint. And then number three, stay rooted in conviction. Stay rooted in conviction. If your values only exist when it's convenient, then they're not convictions. They are preferences. All right. If your values only exist when it's convenient, they're not convictions, they're preferences. Exceptional leaders remain grounded even under pressure. And pressure reveals authenticity. See, anybody can appear disciplined when conditions are easy, but difficult seasons expose what truly governs a person internally. That's what matters. And let me give you a weekly challenge. And I'm going to name this weekly challenge Walk Against the Crowd. All right? Walk against the crowd. This week, what I want you to do is identify one area where you've been tempted to follow the crowd instead of following your conviction. Identify one area that you've been tempted, very, very tempted, to follow the crowd instead of conviction. Then I want you to intentionally choose that narrow path. Choose the one that you know is right. Maybe that means telling the truth. Maybe that means truth. You see, Philly slang came out, and anyway. Maybe that means telling the truth. The truth. All right. I get too relaxed sometimes with y'all. You see, y'all make me comfortable. It also means, or it can also mean remaining disciplined. It can mean apologizing, refusing gossip, showing patience, maintaining standards, or choosing wisdom over your ego. Ooh, that stung. That stung some people. I know it did. It's all good. We had to help each other and build each other up. And here's another challenge. Spend at least 15 minutes this week. Time it if you have to. Spend at least 15 minutes this week in quiet self-reflection. Ask yourself three things. Where have I compromised? Where have I followed convenience over conviction? And am I becoming the kind of leader I would personally trust? So 15 minutes, quiet reflection, ask those 3 questions. Where have I compromised? Where have I followed convenience over conviction? And am I being the kind of leader I would personally trust? Because see, self-awareness is a part of the narrow path. You cannot become exceptional while avoiding honest reflection. See, the broad path may attract crowds, but the narrow path, that builds leaders. And while many people choose visibility, recognition, and status, the greatest leaders focus first on integrity, discipline, wisdom, and self-mastery. Because leadership is not merely about getting people to follow you. It's about becoming someone worthy enough to be followed. So don't be discouraged if your journey feels different. Difficult does not mean wrong. All right, repeat that for me. Difficult or different does not mean wrong. I guess you could say difficult too, right? But different does not mean wrong. In many cases, the narrow path is evidence that you're developing the strength, the character, and the discipline that is required for greater responsibility. Here's what I want you to remember. The broad path often produces temporary success. It does. But the narrow path produces lasting legacy. And as a leader, you want lasting legacy. One path seeks applause. The other builds trust. One path seeks shortcuts. The other develops substance. All right? And in the long run, substance, that foundation, will always outlive performance. So stay grounded, stay disciplined, stay true, because not every road leads upward. And remember, you weren't created to stay low. You weren't designed to stay average. You were built to go higher. Be blessed.
My challenge to you today is, if this episode encouraged, empowered, inspired, or impacted you, or even if it simply planted a seed of transformation, then share it with someone who's ready to lead differently. Thank you again for joining us on the brand new Go Higher Show. I pray you were blessed by the information, the insights, and the challenges that were all shared. For all speaking engagements, public speaking, and leadership coaching, send your requests to gfflifellc@gmail.com. That's gfflifellc@gmail.com. Also, be sure to go on over to Amazon.com and check out the books Standing Before Kings, OG Testimony, The Blue Folder, The Art of Spiritual War, and the original first edition of the OG Testimony Is Not What You Think. All 4 titles now available over on Amazon. The brand new Go Higher Show is brought to you by Greater Faith and Favor Life, GFF Life LLC, where the vision is believe greater, live greater. God bless.